The audit looked at policies and practices of Multnomah County's Department of Community Justice and how they impact people on post-prison supervision and probation. The Department of Community Justice is responsible for overseeing those supervision services, think parole officers. So what sparked this audit? Well, today I sat down with Multnomah County Auditor Jennifer McWork to find out.
So in 2022, my office issued a performance audit on jail conditions, and we saw some disproportionate impacts on people of color in that report, and we're really curious about what we might see if we looked at what happens on probation and parole for adults, and just the connection between potential jail sanction days that can occur when you're on probation and parole and time within the jails.
So that brings us to the three main findings of this latest audit released today. The first was, despite a decrease in the total number of people on supervision between 2019 and 2024, the average technical jail sanction days nearly doubled in length. That's when someone on probation, say, fails to report to a meeting with their parole officer. The audit found that people who make that type of violation are most of the time sent back to jail and for longer periods of time. The second finding in the audit was that Black and Native American people are disproportionately sanctioned to jail more frequently, and they stay there for longer. And the third major finding was the number of referrals to resources like housing and mental health services are inadequate to meet the needs of those on supervision. So let's start with the first finding there. Sending people to jail for what are considered technical violations, like missing a meeting or failure to report, something that is not considered a public safety threat. Here's why the county auditor thinks sending people back to jail for that type of violation can be a problem.
So there's lots of impacts to people's networks, social networks, their job networks, their ability to stay housed when they're put in jail for periods of time when it's the result of one of those technical sanctions.
Today, I talked with this man, Kenneth McGrew. He's a peer mentor supervisor at Miracles Club, a Portland-based support group, helping people reintegrate back into the community after being released from jail or prison.
When people get out of jail, they have nowhere to go. They be lost. And 9 times out of 10, when people get out of jail, they have no resources and no people depending on them. They're going to go back to the same thing they know, and that's gangs and drugs and things like that.
And Kenneth knows what that's like from experience.
So when I was going through the jail system, and when I got out of jail, they just released me back to the jail. I feel like I was just released back to the wild with no structure, no directions. And the first thing I went to is back to the drugs and addiction and guns and all those type of things. So I know how I feel to just be released to jail with nowhere to go.
Now, when it comes to sending people on supervision back to jail for those technical violations I mentioned earlier, the county auditor recommended that the Department of Community Justice only do that when there is a direct public safety threat. Kenneth agrees.
I think sometimes, when jail come about, people get sent back to jail, and then, they get taken away from their family because 9 times out of 10, their family need them. So I feel like give them another option, It should be more option than them straight back to jail.
The county auditor recommends the department create a policy that clearly defines what a public safety threat is as it pertains to sending people back to jail after making a technical violation of their supervision. Here's Denise Pena, the director of Multnomah County's Department of Community Justice.
So the challenge about that is that failure to report is a technical violation. But if a client, if their whereabouts are unknown, and we don't have a way to get a hold of them, and they are no longer staying where they have reported that they're staying, we have an obligation and an expectation from our criminal justice partners to take action on that.
And I think that's true. I definitely see their point. But there's also a lot of opportunity, I think, that DCJ has to really look at the technical sanctions and find other ways to help people reduce having those sanctions in the first place.
And then there is this accountability piece, though, where we have the parole board or the courts are going to be imposing sanction, and there's an expectation that our clients are going to be following and be in compliance with those conditions. And so we will work with them to be successful, but if a client is violating a no contact order, for example, creating new victims in the community, continuing to cause harm, we will need to take action on that. I think about 80% of those on supervision are on supervision for committing a person-to-person crime.
So, unclear at this point if that recommendation to not jail people after certain technical violations will be fully implemented. But then there's the piece about inadequate referrals to services like mental health and addiction treatment. From 2019 to 2023, 38% of people on supervision had a history of homelessness, 26% had a history of mental illness, and 40% had history with substance abuse. According to the audit, those people aren't getting connected to adequate services. Again, Kenneth knows what that's like. He was homeless for about a year downtown Portland.
And I just needed some type of guidance to show me how to live clean and sober and, you know, work an honest job, because some people be out in the streets for so long they forget how to live.
The audit recommends the Department of Community Justice try and get more money from the county to expand resources. Well, easier said than done, since the county just cut about $2.8 million from the Department of Community Justice in this year's budget. And the department is expecting more cuts from their state funding too.
We certainly can advocate for funding, but we are unable to control what the funding actually looks like. And when you think about the core function of parole and probation, it is to provide supervision and the services we really do rely on in the community to help us with those. And just with the current budget state, we already took significant reductions in our FY26 county general funds, and we are anticipating more reductions with our state funding coming up.
Okay, the director also says the lack of housing and mental health resources in Multnomah County makes it harder for them to connect people with care.
We can refer if the service is there. And so if there are reductions for, let's say, the mental health services that the auditor really elevated as a need for our clients and for our community, one of the recommendations was to increase access. And so again, we can refer if the agency is there to help them, but if it's not, or if there's a wait list, which is something that our clients unfortunately encounter, then we're unable to fully meet that goal.
The audit also revealed that Black and Native American people were sanctioned for violations more often and were sent to jail for longer periods of time. From January 2019 to December 2023, of those on supervision, 21% were Black and African American people, yet they made up 28% of those sanctioned. The audit found that parole officers during that same time sanctioned white people the least.
I feel like that's a shame, because this America, we should have an equal opportunity. And when people in jail of color, they be hold a little bit longer. They don't give the opportunities to go to treatment and things like that, like other people do. So.
Now, the director of the Department of Community Justice says they're already taking steps to address racial inequity.
And so I think we've started off with all of our staff last year. In addition to our POs, we did a mandatory implicit bias training for all of our employees, and we had a great completion rate to those. And so that is just one of the many steps that we are taking.
So those were just the top 3 findings from the audit. If you want to read the entire report, head to our website, kgw.com, and look for this story. We'll have it linked there for you. The Department of Community Justice has until the end of May 2027 to fully implement all of the auditor's recommendations.
I'm really hopeful that DCJ will implement these recommendations, because I think ultimately they're better for everyone in our community. If you have people who are able to kind of rehabilitate and become part of the community again, they're not going to be committing crimes. It means we're going to be safer and have a more livable county.
But yes, we're going to follow through with the recommendations that we are able to follow through on.
In 2 weeks, so on July 24th, the auditor is presenting this report to the Board of County Commissioners, along with a list of recommendations for the commissioners to work on, including making sure there is enough housing and mental health treatment for people discharged from supervision. Okay, now it's your turn to weigh in. What do you think about the findings in this report? Does anything stand out to you? Do you have experience with Multnomah County's criminal justice system? Does this track? Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090.